On May 9, 1851, in the humid heat of a spring morning in Wilkinson County, Mississippi, a woman named Eliza was sold at auction for 13 cents. Not $13, but 13 cents, the price of a tin cup or a loaf of day-old bread. The transaction took place on the steps of the county courthouse, beneath a sky the color of pewter, and in front of 23 witnesses whose names were written carefully in the parish book. Hers was not. No record of Eliza's last name exists in any archive, nor any mention of her before or after that day. What survives is a single page, a receipt folded into the back of an 1851 property ledger discovered during courthouse renovations in 1902. Historians who handled it remarked on the peculiar notation scribbled in the margin: "Sold in condition, expecting issue." That phrase, written in the looping script of the clerk, revealed more than the sale price ever could. Eliza was pregnant, and the father of her unborn child was her previous master. In the years before the Civil War, Wilkinson County was a patchwork of cotton plantations spread along the Natchez Trace, its wealth drawn from the backs of the enslaved. The air smelled of wet earth and iron. The town of Woodville, the county seat, was small but proud, its whitewashed courthouse, rising from the center square, framed by two oaks older than the state itself. Every second Saturday, that courthouse became a market for human lives. Buyers arrived from Baton Rouge, Natchez, even Mobile, their carriages rolling over the dirt road before dawn. Auctioneers pinned notices to the wooden posts: Negroes for sale, skilled, domestic, and field. The auctions were conducted with precision. Men were weighed against their labor value, women against their fertility. Children were listed as lot additions. It was a system so ordinary that those who upheld it mistook it for nature. Eliza had been born 26 years earlier on a small tobacco farm near Fredericksburg, Virginia. Her mother, Dinah, was a washerwoman known for her quiet defiance, a woman who whispered scripture under her breath, even when the master forbade it. Eliza was 8 when her family was sold south, part of what traders called the Second Middle Passage, the great migration of enslaved people to the deep cotton lands of Mississippi and Louisiana. The journey broke families in half. When Eliza stepped off the flatboat at Natchez Landing, she never saw her mother again. She was purchased by a man named Charles Whitmore, a planter whose estate, Red Hollow, sprawled along Bayou Pierre. There she worked in the main house as a maid, tending to the Whitmore family, polishing the silver, drawing water for their baths, learning the unspoken rhythm of servitude. Charles Whitmore was a man of property and pretense a widower by 38, respected in church, feared on his land. He considered himself benevolent, the kind of master who read from the Bible after Sunday supper, who spoke of duty and order. But the people he owned saw the truth. His kindness was a performance that ended the moment anyone looked him in the eye. Eliza did not look away. She was 16 when Whitmore began visiting the wash house after dark. At first he came under the pretense of checking the linens. Then came the questions: her age, her work, whether she'd been baptized. Then came silence. Then the sound of his boots on the wooden floorboards. Then his hand. What followed was not love, nor passion. It was power disguised as possession. When she became pregnant, he sent her to the fields under the supervision of his overseer, claiming she had grown lazy indoors. The child, a boy, was born that December and taken from her arms before dawn. Whitmore's sister raised him in the main house, calling him James. On paper, he was recorded as orphaned, his parentage left blank. Eliza was returned to domestic work as though nothing had happened. Years passed. The war of words between North and South grew louder. But on the plantations of Mississippi, life went on as if no change could touch it. Cotton prices rose, and with them, Whitmore's wealth. By 1850, he owned 92 human beings, each reduced to a line on a ledger. Then, in the winter of that year, Whitmore fell ill. Some said it was the fever. Others whispered that it was guilt, though few believed he was capable of it. When he died in February 1851, his estate passed to his younger brother Thomas, a man with neither his brother's fortune nor his restraint. Thomas Whitmore was a gambler, a drinker, a man whose debts outweighed his land. Within weeks of inheriting Red Hollow, he began selling off property to settle accounts. Wagons came and went. Livestock disappeared. Field hands were marched to the auction block. Among those listed for sale was Eliza. But there was a problem. Eliza was again with child, this time by Charles Whitmore, the deceased master. The overseer, a man named Rufus Dade, discovered her condition and informed Thomas. According to the note found in the ledger decades later, Thomas refused to acknowledge the pregnancy at first. But when the local doctor confirmed it, he reportedly said, "Then she's worth nothing but trouble. Sell her before she births another bastard tied to our name." And so he did. The auction on May 9th drew a small crowd. The larger planters had already purchased what they needed earlier in the season. The ones who remained were smaller farmers, traders, and opportunists. Rain threatened from the west, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of it. Eliza stood barefoot on the wooden platform, a plain muslin dress clinging to her skin. She was 6 months pregnant. Her wrists bore faint scars from the shackles used during transport. The auctioneer, Samuel Cartwright, read from his list without looking up. Lot 32 female, age approximately 26, in good health, expecting issue. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pregnant women were often sold for less. They couldn't work the fields and carried what buyers called maintenance risk. Cartwright began the bidding at $10. No one answered. He dropped to $5, then to $1. At last, a voice from the edge of the square said, 13 cents. Laughter scattered through the crowd, but Cartwright, seeing no higher offer, struck the gavel. Sold. The buyer was a man named Henry Dalton, a journeyman carpenter and widower who lived 3 miles north of Woodville. He was known for his rough hands and quiet manners, a man who built barns and church pews and rarely spoke more than needed. Some said he bought Eliza out of pity. Others said he saw in her a servant for his home. Whatever his reason, he led her from the square without a word. Dalton's cabin sat at the edge of a pine grove, small but tidy, with a roof patched from tin and bark. He had once owned 2 field hands, freed after the death of his wife, but his finances had since collapsed. His purchase of Eliza was an anomaly even to himself. He gave her a corner of the cabin and told her she could rest until the child came. For the first time in her life, Eliza slept without chains. In the months that followed, she tended Dalton's small garden, mended his clothes, and spoke little. He never touched her. He did not ask about the child. When he brought food from town, he set it on the table and left her in peace. In August, during a storm that split trees in half, Eliza went into labor. Dalton sent for the midwife, but by the time she arrived, the child, a girl, had already been born. Eliza named her Grace. Witness accounts recorded years later describe the child as light-skinned, with the same gray eyes as the late Charles Whitmore. To Eliza, she was proof that even in a world built on cruelty, something pure could still survive. But peace, like freedom, was a fragile thing. In the autumn of 1852, Thomas Whitmore filed a claim against Dalton, asserting that Eliza's sale had been invalid. According to him, the auctioneer had no authority to sell her while the estate remained under probate review. His petition demanded her return, and the child's arguing that both were unlawfully detained property. The case reached the Wilkinson County Courthouse in November. Court records still exist, though incomplete. What is known is that Dalton appeared in person, while Eliza and her child waited outside under guard. Judge Matthew Vance presided, a man with deep ties to the planter class. Whitmore's lawyer argued first, producing documents of ownership. Dalton presented the auction receipt, the 13-cent payment, and a testimony from Cartwright himself. The judge listened, silent. When the arguments ended, he declared that the sale was indeed irregular but not void. The estate, he ruled, could reclaim Eliza's unborn child had it not already been born. But since Grace had entered the world under Dalton's roof, the matter fell into moral ambiguity. Whitmore was enraged. He rose from his seat, shouting that No bastard of a Whitmore will live free on my name. Dalton, by witnesses' accounts, stood his ground. The judge ordered the case closed, declaring Eliza free from further claim. But freedom, once again, was an illusion. 3 nights later, Dalton's cabin burned to the ground. His body was found near the doorway, a bullet in his chest. Eliza and Grace were gone. For years, their fate remained a mystery. Some said Eliza fled north along the Mississippi, guided by abolitionists. Others believe she was recaptured and sold under another name in Louisiana. In 1866, after the war, a freedwoman named Eliza Dalton appeared on census records in Street Landry Parish with a 14-year-old daughter named Grace. No birth records confirm their identity, but the timing and the names were too precise to ignore. That same year, a man named Duncan Fairchild, formerly of Wilkinson County, testified before a Freedmen's Bureau agent that he had once seen a woman and a light-skinned child hiding in the marshes near Bayou Teche, assisted by Union soldiers. His testimony ended with a single line. They said they were bound for Galveston to find a man who bought her for 13 cents and gave her freedom. Whether Dalton truly freed her or merely sheltered her until she could flee, no one can say. But the ledger discovered half a century later tells the rest of the story: the sale, the names, the signatures, and that haunting phrase, expecting issue. In 1899, a local historian named Josephine Rankin wrote about the discovery of the document. Her notes, preserved in the archives of the Mississippi Historical Society, read, "The sale of this woman for so pitiful a sum reveals more of our past than any speech or monument ever could. To sell a human being for 13 cents is to place a price on the soul itself, and yet perhaps unknowingly, the buyer bought not property, but redemption." Rankin tried to locate descendants but found none. She wrote that the courthouse clerks urged her not to publish the story, fearing the reopening of old wounds. She refused. Her essay, 13 Cents, appeared in a small regional journal in 1903, then disappeared into obscurity until rediscovered nearly a century later. Today, historians debate whether Eliza was real or symbolic, a composite drawn from dozens of similar records. But the receipt, the one dated May 9th, 1851, remains in the Mississippi State Archives, fragile and brown with age. And on its back, faint but still visible, are 6 words written in pencil: "Tell Grace she was never owned." History remembers the names of men who built empires on the backs of others, but it rarely remembers the women who endured them. Eliza's story, like so many, was not recorded in textbooks or sermons. It survived only in whispers, in the margins of forgotten documents, in the faint ink of a name almost erased. Yet her story tells us something the ledgers cannot: that dignity can exist even when the world denies it, that freedom can begin with the smallest act, even one bought for 13 cents. If stories like this move you, if you believe they deserve to be remembered, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because history doesn't live in books. It lives in the voices willing to tell what others tried to bury.